Welcome back to Beyond the Court with League One Volleyball, where we deep dive with some of the top coaches and leaders in volleyball and beyond. I'm your host, Courtney Thompson, and we all know that great coaches will challenge their athletes to find their best in every area of their game, while also helping to inspire and motivate them in ways that go far beyond the court. Today, I am joined by my dear friend and incredible human, Nicole Davis. Nicole was a back-to-back national champion at USC, a two-time Olympic medalist and world champion in indoor volleyball. I was fortunate enough to be teammates with Nicole for 8 years on the USA team, so we have been through a lot together. After retiring, Nicole has worked as a mindset coach with Finding Mastery, where I was also lucky to work with her for about 7 years. And then she decided to go on and complete her doctorate in clinical psychology. As if that wasn't enough, she's also a black belt, so just a total badass all the way around. She really is a leader in the mental health space and teaching mental skills to young athletes all the way up to Olympians, coaching staffs at every level, parents and corporate clients alike. And I am incredibly lucky to call her a friend. Nicole, I'm so excited for this conversation. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited too.
Yeah, so just let's start by asking, where are you calling in from and how you been?
Calling in from Los Angeles, California. I've been great. Yeah. Coming off like still the high of Paris and going out to the games and just the energy and the vibrance of it. We're super stoked in LA to be hosting the 28 games and getting ready for it. And so I think that just like energy is carrying through, at least still for me, towards what feels like kind of the push towards the end of the year.
I can't wait to see what happens in LA for these games, but obviously we got to hang in Paris quite a bit. What was the best part for you as an alum of the program and Olympian?
It's just such a special thing to kind of be on the other side of it. You know, for you and I, like we competed, indoor volleyball competes the entire sort of length of the games. And so it's like we don't really get to experience like the joy and the energy and the connectedness and the unity of the Olympic Games itself, of the Olympic movement itself. And so to just be like everybody else walking down the street and it's like a part of the mass and like really like emotionally invested in everything you're watching, you know, it's just like so freaking fun. So I loved being a fan. I loved cheering my face off. My sister-in-law won a bronze medal. She's part of the rugby team, you know, and they won in the last couple seconds of the game against world number one. And so like, that's how we kicked off the Olympic experience. So it's just a lot of like really cool moments like that.
I love it. I think I saw you for the first time right after that match or game, or I don't know. You were hyped from something.
I was hyped, yeah.
That was great. So, well, you have such a wide range of kind of experience and knowledge, but can you just start by sharing how you first started playing volleyball and how that inspired you to get into the career you are now?
I first started playing volleyball actually out of, kind of just like it looked like fun. I was in 8th grade and someone from the high school that I was going to go to literally came with like pieces of paper and posted them on the wall and said, if you wanted to try out for a sport, write your name. And I played volleyball maybe like once at a family reunion on the grass, you know, and like once in PE. And I was doing martial arts at the time, which is a very sort of individualistic sport. I just wanted to like get into a team sport again. And so when I was 14 and starting high school, I literally like just signed up to try out.
And how did you get from there to where you are now in your career?
Good question.
Yeah, few years in between.
Yeah. As people know, like the community around volleyball is incredible. And so people, you know, started saying you should play club volleyball. I started doing that. And I was really lucky to have a great coach, Brett Almazan Cesar. And we put together sort of this massive team my senior year for club volleyball, all 12 of us. Signed Division I scholarships. 4 of us got to play against each other in a couple Final Fours. And so one of those people was Jackie Robinson. She's 6'4" opposite hitter. And Jarrett Elliott was the coach at USC at the time. He was the interim head coach. And so he had gone up to Stockton, California, which is where I'm from, to watch my 6'4" opposite Jackie practice and saw me and said, hey, like come down. We want you to be a part of our program. And so, you know, I was really fortunate to head down to USC and we sort of rebuilt the program, won a couple national championships for the first time in 20 years, and then got invited to the national team, had my 12-year sort of stint on the national team. And in the last couple of years of my time on the national team, we started working with my mentor, someone who's world renowned in the field of psychology and sport and performance psychology, Dr. Michael Gervais. I think you've had
Shout out, Mike.
Yeah, shout out Mike. I think you've had him on the podcast. I think being around him, I started to kind of be able to make sense of my own experiences. When I was in college, I felt absolutely invincible. I used to pass like top spin serves with one hand on purpose to see if I could dime it.
Oh
You know
my
what I
God.
mean? Like I felt untouchable in college, and I
You were
was
to us.
and I was totally okay in the realm of like, I'll just work my ass off. And if that doesn't work, I'll work even harder than that. And
Yeah.
you get to the national team or professional levels of international volleyball, that method doesn't work anymore. I think being around Dr. Mike was the first time I really started to have language around like what that experience was like for me, and
Mm.
how and why I really struggled in moments that like really I cared about, that mattered for me, that had consequence for me.
Yeah.
And it was nice to start to put some words to that experience. And so I got pretty excited about learning more science around that, and then figuring out like how do I help other people unlock at an earlier age. So that's not I don't know. I wish I would have known earlier what I came to know, what I know now, because I just think that I would have had so much more joy and like connectedness in my experience playing.
Yeah.
Um, if I had known. And so, went back to school, paid a lot of money to have zero free time. Um,
So good. We were all, the friend group was like, where's Nicole? Where did she go? We're glad to have you back.
yeah, yeah, I'm glad to be back.
Yeah.
It felt like another Olympic quad. I was doing 60-hour work weeks for 4 straight years. So
Dude, so gnarly. It's so relatable. And when I was in college, I remember, Jim McLaughlin saying like, hey, we gotta have great thoughts. And if we don't think right, it's going to impact everything we do. And I still at that point didn't quite grasp what that meant. Like somewhere in a journal, I think in college, I was like, I think I need to start doing karate, because that was like the only thing I thought of, like, yeah, train your mind. So can you just speak to like how you think about the power of training your mind and conditioning kind of your inner experience, or having awareness around
mhm.
that, especially for like a young athlete?
Yeah, I think the easiest way to talk about it is like we get that if we work really hard and we practice and we do lots of repetitions of something very specific, like how to pass a free ball, or how to set off one foot, like and there's progressions of all of those skills. And when I think about how to train the mind, that's kind of what I think about, except we're replacing sort of those physical aspects of things, right? Like the movement and the strength and the sort of physicality of it with things like catching the quality of our thoughts, to Jim's point, like what
Yeah.
is the quality of my thought in this moment? How is the quality of my thought right now? We can think of that almost like a behavior, right? How does that pattern or repeat, like the repetitiveness of that, and how I make sense of and how I work with the moments that I'm in, how does that impact how I feel and how I perform? And can I, through repetition, catch that, and then do something more productive with it so that I feel like I can really meet the moment, really lean into it and like go for it anyways. So I can build a sense of capacity, right? Rather than like feeling stuck or feeling like we're getting worse at things, which is sometimes how it feels.
Yeah.
And so, like I really think about it as like, how do we build strength with the way that we think about and work with sort of the challenges that we face? Because sport's challenging. We sign up for it to be challenging. We like it. And then it also feels like sometimes, to quote you, like we just want to put a damn hoodie on and like kind of withdraw from it and escape, right? Because
My
it's like
hibernate
that,
mode, that's
yeah,
right.
yeah, the hibernate mode. Because like I don't want to deal with the challenge anymore. It just becomes
Yeah.
overwhelming.
So you and I played together for 9 seasons or 8 seasons on the national team. You kicked my ass in college, and then you helped me get a job at Finding Mastery. So mentored me through that. And then we got to work together for a long time. And I share that because we have such a shared common language that can be such an accelerator. And a lot of the coaches I work with are so wise. They're so brilliant, and they often haven't had as many reps kind of in this space. Right. So to get really tangible, if you were coaching a team or talking to coaches that were, coaching a club team, What are like the non-negotiable mental skills that you were like, at the end of this season, I really want my athletes to understand kind of the
Mhm.
mechanics and the how-to of these things?
I would say there's four. I really want my athletes to understand confidence and how the things that they say to themselves impact how open they are to learning and their ability to get better or their ability to stay in sticky moments and not just like get good afterwards or get back to good, but then also connect to people, right? So
Yeah.
confidence is the first one. I think calm, just understanding like, hey, it's pretty natural for a body to light up in certain situations and to feel
Oh
hype and
God.
to feel too much of it sometimes and not enough other times. And like,
Yeah.
what do we do to sort of leverage that rather than just what I hear a lot is like, I don't feel confident or I don't feel good in my body. And we rely so much on wanting to feel good to play good versus can we really understand sort of how we can, one, feel bad and still play great with great sort of mindset skills, but also not to have to rely on it and that we have sort of more agency to guide those processes. So confidence and like the ability to like regulate our physiology or what finding mastery we call calm.
Yeah.
And then sort of like optimism, but I really think it's important for athletes to be able to always filter and find the good.
Mm.
Even if it's like the most bonehead thing they've ever done in their history of like playing volleyball, like can we help people filter and find the good? Because it's really like our ability to filter and pivot our attention in moments that are most challenging for us that allows us to be resilient, allows us to come back to having a like great beginner's mind to like meet the moment. So
Mm.
filtering and finding what's good, which we might call optimism. And then I think what's challenging about sport is we talk a lot about outcomes and they're not in our control. And so I want athletes to feel a great sense of agency or a sense of like internal control over their own experiences and their ability to impact what's happening in the future. And so
Mm.
control would be the last. So confidence, physiological regulation, or what we might call calm under pressure, optimism, and control would be the four. Yeah. And I think realistically, like any of those two, like if we could
Right.
even
Yeah.
get two of those, right, and be like
Yeah.
so crazy consistent as coaches in the way that we
Mm.
talk about and teach those skills, that it would make a drastic impact in young athletes' experiences.
Absolutely. I feel like every great coach I played for, at some point in the season, the whole team is kind of like rolling their eyes, like, oh my God, you say that so much,
Uh-huh.
And then there's like one point at the end of the year where you're like, oh, that's what that like really means. And it becomes kind
Mhm.
of embodied. So I like that approach and how it's so fun when you have agency
Mhm.
just in life, even when you're orienting towards, oh, wait a minute, I can dictate so much of this, not everything.
Mhm.
And there's so much momentum there, but if you could share one way that you would apply all of those four in a
Mhm.
practice, let's say you got 2 practices a week, 2 hours each with a club team, call it
Mhm.
14s.
Mhm.
How would you go about weaving that in?
Sure. I think that the top of practice is a great spot for it. And then really working hard as coaches to find sort of a teachable moment where you can reinforce what someone's doing that is aligned with it, right? So if we're talking about, for example, confidence first, I think it's really just like as simple as, hey, what we say to ourselves matters. So be the best coach you could possibly be. What's the thing that you want to say to yourself after you make a mistake today? Write it on the board, right? And so this takes 60 seconds.
Yeah.
And then when someone makes a mistake and they get back to good and you catch them doing that, it's like, oh my God, how did you do that? Pull them in, highlight them, love them up in front of the team, because that's like giving a dog bone, right? Like it's like,
Hmm.
yes, this is awesome. And we need those reinforcers. We need to catch people doing well more often than we're sort of trying to pick the lock on what's not good enough. And so if you can pull people in and say, oh my God, you just got back to good after mistake, like how did you do that? What was the thought that helped you? Then we can create sort of this like steady drip, right? Where we're really loving people up when they're practicing the skill. And then that's creating a sense of competency for them that they can do it in other more challenging times. When it comes to like physiological regulation, it's like, hey, this might be weird, but like let's do a couple breaths right now. And then every time we huddle, every time we go back to serve or serve receive, let's make sure we're doing collectively like a deep breath together before we step in.
Yeah.
And then catching people doing it right and reinforcing it, right? Or when someone inevitably is struggling, like normalizing it. Hey, like I see we're in it. Just had this conversation with a team that I work with. Like, was anybody able to like label or just like articulate, like it feels frantic and like urgent right now, and bring people in, slow it down. Let's take a deep breath. Let's focus on one thing that's
Yeah.
next, you know? So teaching, I also think is really important. Young athletes as part of like the coaching process, teaching people like, oh, these are the moments, right? And it's okay to stop and label it. It's like normal to struggle, and we've got skills we can use. I think that's I think that could be really impactful.
The normalizing, I think I was just listening to Brené Brown talk about how it's like the biggest antidote to shame.
Yeah.
And just like, even if you can't solve it or fix it, or like, we don't know quite the perfect skill as a coach, it's like, yeah, we care. I get it.
Yeah. It's like
Mm.
speaking life into it, or right, like just like, this is the thing that I'm experiencing.
Yeah.
Is so powerful, you know? And I think coaches also have massive opportunity with athletes in the language that they use, if it can be centered around optimism and around finding the good, around strengthening strengths rather than focusing on weaknesses, around what's 100% in an athlete's capacity control constantly, that then becomes their language, the way they talk to themselves, the way they talk to each other in moments of test. And so I think, you know, some of the greatest coaches we've been around, and I'm thinking of Pete Carroll right now, you know, who was at SC when I was at SC, and then went on to the Seahawks, you know,
Let's
like,
go Hawks.
yeah. He just like, it doesn't matter like if it's at his house over dinner or in passing at the hall at VMAC, at their training facility, or like in a press conference, like the consistency with which he talks about the game and teaches the game and interacts with people is like wild. Like
Yeah.
it is like you get the same version of him, and you can really catch like his lenses, right? That it is fundamentally optimistic, that he fundamentally cares about people, and that like he really is working to like empower people, right? Like create that sense of agency. I
Yeah.
think there's a massive opportunity for us, for the coaches listening, to be very intentional about the things that they say, and repetitive,
Yeah.
like to your point, in a nauseating way,
Yeah.
like in a nauseating way, because inevitably there's that moment at the end of the season, right, where it clicks, right? And
Hmm.
so I think this idea of like, how do we plant seeds and water them, is so important, especially for an age group like 14-year-olds, right?
Yeah.
That it might not even come to fruition that season for you, but one day down the line, right, it's going to click for them that like, oh, I'm in control right now of my experience and what I decide to do.
I say this respectfully, but there's been a few times where even like a college program has asked me to come into the gym, and they do so many amazing things, and they'll say things like, man, my team's really anxious in these moments, or they're so worried about outcomes, blah, blah, blah. And then I'm listening to like the staff talk,
Mhm.
and it's like apparent, obviously it's way easier on the outside to observe this, because I'm sure I've done this too, but you're in it and you're like, well, we're all talking about outcomes,
Mhm.
you know? And so for coaches to really learn the modeling of that and to commit to it themselves,
Mhm.
how would you, because I also have observed you make some radical shifts, I think, in how you see the world and how you choose to like engage with moments in honestly the most beautiful way I've ever seen someone close to me. And yeah, it's really cool. So from your experience, if a coach is like, wow, I really want to commit to this, what can they do for themselves outside of this kind of programming and ideas for the team?
You know, if like a team is showing up anxious in a like moments of test, there's a transaction taking place between the coach and the team, and they have some stimulus value in that moment. So, you know, in the way that we get on a plane and go through emergency briefing, and the idea is like, hey, if oxygen drops in the cabin, right? Like put your own oxygen mask on first. I think it's important, for coaches to understand their own stimulus value and how their own psychology, the quality of their thoughts, their investment in the outcome versus the process, their ego in it as well. And I mean that not in a like a pejorative way. Like we all
Mhm.
have sort of a way that we identify in a sense of self that's led us to making choices to coach, making choices to fill in the blank. So I think the more self-discovery and reflection coaches can do to understand how they're showing up and how that might be transacting or interacting with what they're experiencing with their athletes, doing the work themselves. Like you can't be optimistic with your team if that's not your fundamental lens. It's not like you can like a light switch you
Yeah.
could turn on and like always find the good and like focus on people's strengths if you're very self-critical, for example.
Right.
So the work really starts with the coaches as individuals to sort of confront like in their moments to test like what comes up for them, what's the quality of their thoughts, how is their physiological regulation, and what are the lenses from which they see the world, and do the work as an individual to sort of optimize so that then it's second nature in how they respond in those moments and really can like be the lighthouse for other people
Yeah.
um, in those moments.
I don't know if you remember this, but we were playing, I think it was in Thailand. It was like an early World Grand Prix. I was coming off the bench, and for whatever reason, I was very rattled, like pretty high on the
Activation scale.
activation scale. Yeah, nervous, anxious. I was like a little shaky. And I like nothing that usually worked was working to get me like back down. And so I went in the first set and it was like pretty tragic. Came out and you were also on the bench at that point, and I was like, Nicole, can you just slap me? I don't know. That might work. Can you pinch me? Or no, I asked you to slap me and you were like, I'm not going to do that, but I will pinch like the back of your arm, and try to like snap out of it.
Uh-huh.
And I want to know now, we've evolved a little bit. If an athlete is in like a very anxious state, either in practice because there's a lot going on or in a match, these kids, there's, I don't know, external stressors, college coaches there, big moment, and they're really high on the anxiety scale. What are some things you would do? And maybe you've already talked about them, but what would you go to?
One, just, I've been talking about this with a team that I work with, is like having someone, right? A source of support when we're feeling anxious is so important. And it feels like there's like a massive barrier to overcoming that, like to have someone that you can actually be vulnerable with, not just like, yeah, I mean, that wasn't so great, just to be like, I'm pooping my pants right now. Like,
Yeah,
I need
yeah,
something different, and like to have someone and the willingness also to like go there with someone, I think is super important, because just that support and kind of naming it is so important to like being capable of like working with it differently. Anxiety usually like makes our mind time travel. So
mm,
we spend a lot of time kind of stuck in the future and kind of catastrophizing all the things that could go wrong, the ways we can make mistakes, the ways the other team could like, play better than us, or the way the coach could take us out, all the things, right? And then we really lose the ability to kind of connect to all of the training and access sort of our skill. And so the other thing, I don't know for you, of pinching the pain in the arm. One of the things the pain in the back of your arm might be doing is it's really forcing your attention to that in the moment, away from the time traveling of
yeah,
anxiety and the catastrophizing. So I think the more that we can have something to focus on, whether it's, I like, the breath is always nice, but it's when we're really anxious, it can be more anxiety provoking to focus on the breath and recognize like, oh my God, it's hard to breathe.
yeah,
So usually for younger athletes, I move away from that as like kind of the first line of defense, more towards like, can I feel my socks in my shoes right now? Or can I engage in some sort of like feedback or support loop with someone else? Can I just choose one thing right now, one thing to focus on? Because when we start to feel anxious and overwhelmed, we start to sort of figure out like how do I put the whole puzzle together to make this better, rather than can I just like put this one piece of the puzzle
right.
like back on board, right? And so we become kind of polarized in the way we think. And so if we could just be like, okay, let me just like try this one thing, see if I can make a little bit of difference here, right? So you can support directing your mind back to the present moment as it's just like getting carried away in time travel, and then being, really particular about just choosing one
Yeah.
little thing to work on, and celebrate the F out of it. And as coaches, we can help athletes
Yes.
do that too, right? Like we
Yeah.
we can recognize anxiety in people. And so it's like catching it, being like, oh yeah, you're in it. Okay, cool. Like feel your feet. okay, what are you working on right now? And then when they do anything that resembles it, right? Even if it's not right, it's like, shit, yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
You know, I think we really help people work through those moments a lot better than we tend to do.
Yeah, I love that. And I think something it's a common misunderstanding is like it's similar to meditation. Like the goal in all of this is not to never feel activated or nervous or anxious. So can you speak to that a little bit of when someone's in that, how we can celebrate that as a learning opportunity?
There's a sports like that we used to work with who literally will tell athletes like, I don't care about your emotions. Because like, of course you're going to feel intense emotions if you're doing something you really care about. And so we tend to label that as nervousness, and then that gets interpreted as not prepared enough, you know? And so I think one is just like the normalizing it of like, yeah, of course you care. That's awesome. Like, I love that you care. It would be weird if you didn't care. And then when it comes to like all of the skills or practices that we talked about, it's not so that like normally we talk about like how do I get rid of these feelings, but uh, like you're not doing something for a second that you care about and it's over with, right? So we're not necessarily going to get rid of feelings. We can sort of adjust a little bit and regulate certainly through like a course of time, but it's like, hell yeah, we're in it and we feel it. So let's work with the feeling. Let's see how great we can be if we feel bad right now, because, like we used to talk about the national team, like if you got to throw up and it's the gold medal game, are you going to sit out the game? Or are you going to run off the court, throw up in a trash can and like
Yeah.
run back on the court? Shout out to Nancy Metcalf, like, so like,
Moose.
so like we want to learn how to be great in moments that are hard, right? And so this is it. And so let's figure it out, right? And so bringing more of a like, let's figure it out. Let's be sort of flexible and agile in the way that we work with this, rather than sort of foreclose on it as, oh my God, I feel so wonky, I can't do this, right? I think can really teach athletes to like just stay in it. Let's stay in it a little longer. Let's stay in
Yeah.
it a little longer, right? Because then we're just like building so much capacity for difficult things, right? And what we see a lot is the moment that it gets difficult, or the moment there's not sort of a quick reinforcement, the moment that that sort of end goal is at stake, that there's a shutting down with this generation, because everything's kind of tip of the finger.
Yeah.
And so we want to really just like build resilience, build hardiness, like help them stay in it and build capacity, and freaking love it when it's uncomfortable and challenging.
God, it's so fun coming from that place.
Yeah.
You kind of just hit on this, but I want to specifically ask to keep pulling on that a little bit. We just spent the week with about 10 of our club directors, and it's so fun to hear their perspectives and what they're kind of working through and curious about. And the topic came up about this generation in particular, of the struggle as a coach of knowing when to help them push through and when to help them understand like it's okay to take a day or a mental health day, or when do you foster that grit versus giving them a little more grace and say, hey, come back tomorrow. So how do you think about that?
Unfortunately, there's like no blanket answer, right? Because yeah, I think like the first and foremost depends on the quality of your relationship with that athlete and how much insight you have into sort of where their struggles are and what they're rooted in, and also some insight about what the family system is like and how it reinforces that showing up in the athlete. I think generally, if we can like work to challenge folks just outside of their capacity, whatever that is, whether it's intellectual or emotional or physical, and then work to sort of create a quick feedback loop where it's like, see, you can do that. Like clients in group therapy, like crying, and being like,
Yeah.
yeah, see, you can stay in this and still like feel these intense emotions, right?
Yeah.
So if we can get people, right, like to just challenge to build grit, right? Like, okay, hey, can we commit to the next 5 minutes and see if that's tolerable for you? If an athlete's like, I have to leave, I want to leave, for example. Hey,
Mm-hmm.
what about, can we just do 4 minutes? Can we do 4 minutes and see if that's tolerable for you? Like, how can I support you? And see, right? See what it's like for them to be kind of in that space where they're just outside of their capacity, and see how much they can tolerate. And then I think it's important to have thoughtful conversations if there are sort of mental health issues, diagnoses on board to understand what that means for the athlete, how that shows up for the athlete, how that impacts the athlete and the way they relate to other people on the team, and to have a ton of compassion, right? So it's like
Hmm.
meeting people where they're at, seeing, and testing, can they build a little tolerance and capacity, and also having a shit ton of compassion. The things that young athletes have on their plate now, like I didn't even have to think about. I didn't do internships during the summer in between club seasons. I
Wild.
did no extra training. We trained twice a week. That's it. Like it's totally different. So it's really easy when people aren't showing up the way that you want them to judge.
Yeah.
And even if you don't mean to be that way, or even if you don't sort of align with that being part of our values, that is just sort of a natural propensity of the brain, is to judge when we don't understand someone's behaviors, and to
Hmm.
like really be able to recognize how that might be getting in the way of you really like meeting the person where they're at. Because volleyball matters, outcome matters. We don't get to do the thing if we, like can't hang in, can't produce.
Yeah.
And the most important thing is to like have people feel seen and have an experience that is facilitative of the development and learning as a human being. And I think it's really easy to lose sight in the moments where an athlete's quitting or kind of breaking down or having intense emotions, to hold both truths, right? That this is about this sort of bigger, higher order thing about life and development and the human experience. And part of that is like pain and suffering and struggle. And someone can be
Yeah.
trying their very best in a moment and it still not be what we need.
To that point, Terry is one of my favorite humans. She's the club director at Union. And she was curious about social media and the
Mhm.
role and how it's impacting young athletes. I know you and I are working on a project right now to help some athletes at Love in this realm. But what should coaches understand about the effects of social media? And is there anything they can do to support their athletes in that?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest things you and I are working on is helping the athletes develop a greater sense of awareness of the pros and cons of social media use, and also how does this make me feel, and how does that impact my mood, my performance, how I show up with other people. So I think the worst thing would be for coaches to sort of poo-poo on social media, because it is a piece of the generation, right? Like it's one of the ways that they interact socially. It's one of the ways that they learn. It's one of the ways that they consume information. And so we want to just like recognize that it is a piece of it. And I think going back to this idea of like autonomy or agency, once the individual, like do some work with the individuals to understand, okay, like what fills your bucket, what helps you feel confident, what helps you feel capable, and when do you need to cut off that relationship? Or recognizing we're dealing with this as a team. Like if it's locker room time, so to speak, right? The moments before a game. And for some folks, the thing that helps them is mindless distraction and making TikTok videos right before like we walk out into the game. Understanding, okay, how might that impact other people on my team?
Ooh,
So now we're going from the individual sort of relationship with social media and its benefits, and also when it becomes sort of, negatively impactful to the individual, but then also as like a system or a unit, like how do people's individual differences in relationships impact how we walk onto the court when it's time to go. And so I would love for coaches to just like have open conversations with athletes and help them build awareness,
yeah.
of those two pieces, like my own relationship and then how that kind of might help someone or hurt someone in the moments before we kind of do the thing together.
Coach has gone to the days where we're just worrying about setting out in row one.
Gone are
So
the days.
a lot more at play here. That's why it's rocket science, you know? Did you see the interview with Coco Gauff when she won? I think it was the semis. I can't remember which match it was in the US Open. And they were like, what were you doing? What were you listening to on your way out to the match? She goes, oh, I was on TikTok. So even the best of the best. Yeah. That mindless stuff. And
I mean,
um,
our generation, the way we like mindlessly distracted ourselves was totally different. Like it
yeah,
wasn't,
Walkmans and
Walkman,
magazines.
Sony Discmans, those types of things. So like we all get, and like we get the pull to mindless distraction as well,
Right.
like, or avoidance, procrastination, all the things. It's just like recognizing how that might show up, and
Mhm.
again, like having compassion for it. We all have kind of the ways that we figure out how to
Yeah, cope ahead. I love how you coined that.
cope ahead, and then have them have agency around it so that they feel like they're in control of sort of how they're showing up.
It's also cool how you frame this because like we don't need as coaches to have the answers.
No.
It's co-discovery or like, hey, this is the reality. What's true for you, and what do we want to do
Mm.
moving forward?
Oh yeah, I love the co-discovery process, right?
One thing we get asked a lot also is, some athletes come in the gym, they're fired up. They're the ones that were just like always going, like you were as an athlete. For the teams that feel like apathetic and unmotivated and slow and the coach is having a hard time getting the group kind of moving forward, where would you point them skill wise?
Like when we look at motivation, maybe, or apathy, usually it's like it feels too big, feel overwhelmed. I can't figure out what's in my capacity to control here. I don't feel connected to kind of what we're doing, whether it's the big picture, just today, like I don't understand this drill. Why are we doing it? Why are we doing sixes? Why are the outside hitters competing today? Those types of things. And so, and maybe there's not enough reinforcement or sort of, yeah, reinforcement is the broader term, but like taking a look as coaches of like what are we highlighting in practice, right? So
Yeah.
important pieces of sort of motivation or sense of control, um, competency, and then connection. And so I think it's really easy when we're in that space of like a team not being that motivated or almost feels like flat or apathetic to sort of go big picture and like rah,
Yeah.
you know, versus like, okay, gang, what's in our capacity control today? Write one thing down that like is 100% in your capacity control that you're working on, right? And so then we're hitting control and we're also hitting progress. Like, what am I working on specifically today? And then go find someone else. What are they working on? And then as many times as possible, see if you can love them up when you catch them doing it, right? And so it's like creating connection as well. So I think the more that we can just like drill down into like the moment to moment
Yeah.
and really create energy and a sense of control and connectedness moment to moment rather than big picture, hey, we want to win nationals this year, this is how we're going to do it, we got to work hard today. It's like no one cares about that right now. Like they've got 3 tests tomorrow and a paper they got to turn in, and like
God.
they haven't been able to hang out with their homies outside of volleyball, so like
Yeah.
we get really like in muddy waters when we try to go too big with it. So I think just coming back to like right here right now.
Coaches, it's such a beautiful thing to commit to, and it can be so hard.
Yes.
It truly is like the full range. And just a quick plug to coaches, can you speak to the importance of their recovery? Because you and I know very well it is real hard to show up with fire when you're smoked and
Yeah.
exhausted. So can
Yeah.
you speak to them, just investing in themselves?
There's so much, especially if you're like really invested and like, you love what you do, that it's like really easy to like get caught up in the excitement of it. Or it's easy if you're, kind of in a space where you're trying to like prove yourself or kind of grow as a coach to like overwork, over prepare, same way that athletes do that when they're feeling anxious, and to really recognize if you're in that space, right? And it's compromising things like how much sleep you're getting and whether you're eating, like a semblance of like a varied and balanced diet, for example. Like, have you eaten
Yeah,
before you
yeah,
even get to,
seriously.
what I mean? Like, have you eaten
Yeah.
before you start practice?
Full time job, young kids
Well,
driving to
yeah,
the
exactly,
practice
right?
for the week.
All
Yeah.
the things like, have you eaten? Have you gotten a workout in, once this week? Or like, are there ways for you to sort of do that, or are you just hitting balls and, designing practice? And so I just, if it's so easy because like you can pull the string and it doesn't unravel really quickly. It just like is like this slow unraveling of like your cup emptying and your cup emptying, and then
Oh, it's
it
tough.
yeah. And so like to really be mindful of like your energy stores and what creates energy for you and what takes energy away. There's also something to be said for leaving a little bit in the morning that you're excited about, that like um, really gets you going and keeps you kind of in it and allows for better recovery as well. But like we can't be good for other people if we're not taking care of ourselves. And the first thing that kind of shuts down for us, in addition to like just like problem solving, is like empathy. And
Yeah.
I would say that that's your number one job as a coach, is to be able to like really attune to people. Because I don't know, although we would love to think that all 12 of our athletes or 14 of our athletes are going to sign Division I scholarships and then go on to play in League One volleyball and have this like incredible professional
Ew.
career, right?
Yeah.
Hey, um, the statistics are pretty small, and so your job as a coach is to like really be with people.
Coaches, we love you. Take care of yourselves out there. Even if it's a thin slice. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
My guy, Ben from Iowa United, big fan. He's a brilliant man with a great heart. And
yeah,
so
Ben.
I love this question. And I think you and I grin at it a little bit, but how do you think about, in volleyball, we can measure things and stats and we can see improvement over time. How do we know this in this mental space that what we're doing is making an impact, or we should pivot, or like, how do we measure this in a way so that we can be most meaningful?
How do we, is the question like, how do we measure the impact of mindset skills training?
Yeah, in
Mhm.
the spirit of like to know if we're helping or we're doing the right things, and maybe it's a season, maybe it's like in 5 years at a new club, you know?
Yeah. I mean, in the field of psychology, we have measures, that you can do, like pre-post to measure things like this. Um, I think more than anything, you and I have talked quite a bit about this. Um, but this idea of like, can people find joy in the tough moments? Can they still be grounded in the tough moments? And I think that is the like freedom on the other side of that is like the greatest sort of measure. Um, and usually that leads to sort of more wins,
Yeah.
right? Like if you
Yeah.
had everyone on the team that was able to do that, to stay connected and still find joy and, be present in tough moments, probably win more.
Yeah.
I remember there was a time on the national team where we got to this like sweet space where like we could be down by 8 points against like a top ranked team and still just like be there, like be connected to each other, like smile and laugh, and like still stay connected to like what was next for us, and
Yeah.
like and so is there a hard metric for it? Maybe not. Are kids smiling when they walk off the court? Are kids connecting even when they're having a hard time? How does that relate to sort of their aspirations and their ability to feel competent and capable of tackling hard shit down the road? Like for me, that's like the most incredible thing.
I feel like it's similar to culture where
Hmm.
it is hard to articulate sometimes or measure in a positive way, but when it's bad, you know,
There's such a felt sense to
you
it, right?
absolutely know.
Like
Yeah.
you can, yeah, I think, you and I are at a point where we can walk into a culture and with minutes kind of get a sense of like where it's at on a scale from like high performing to amateur and anything in between. Because there's
Yes.
this just felt sense of like how we do things around here. And it really, it gets revealed in the moment's attention and challenge.
Yeah. Who was one of your favorite coaches of all time? And what did you love about playing for him?
I think I'm in a space where I've like kind of taken the good from the different coaches, like I think they
Yeah.
all had drastically different strengths. Um, like Hugh was really great at like high level, like this is volleyball IQ, like this is the way that we want to think about and play the game. And so like the teaching aspect of like I felt like I grew the most in my ability to like read the game and like be an intelligent volleyball player under Hugh. And the work that we did to kind of really study and be learners of the game.
Yeah.
With Jenny, she had Long Ping. She had such a like a felt sense of moments, So like she would make these like game time decisions that we like really didn't understand. And then we would just like play better. And it's like, how is she doing that? It's like she had a magic wand
It's
because she could be like,
impressive. Yeah.
yeah, she was so attuned because she was using sort of those that skill set that she had as one of the greatest players ever to play the game
Yeah.
to really feel sort of the dynamics for us on the court. And I think it's really easy. Karch is really great at the statistics of the game and understanding sort of that aspect of things. and it's really easy to get kind of black and white in between, the emotionality of the game, the statistics, and strategy of the game.
Yeah.
And I think the best coaches can kind of jump in the middle at times, or like hold the line for like, these are the standards, and this is also kind of part of how we want it to feel, or how it can feel, and like, this is how we can do it. So I also think, Mick and Paula, like, we were well prepared at USC, as you might remember, for anything.
Sadly so.
Like, we were so well trained, and this was something, we took so much pride at USC on the B side of things, that we were all preparing, like, the best we could, so that in any moment anyone could step in the game. I think Jenny Longping did a really nice job of that, as well as preparing like the younger players for key moments. And we had those moments at the Olympic Games where people stepped in and stepped up because they were given opportunities to do that early. But like the idea, also the best coaches have really emphasized the impact of the B side, so to speak, if you want to call it that, but just like these ideas that like we could all be game changers at any point.
Yeah.
And like, we want to like figure out how do we level up for each other every single day. And I've had, like a couple coaches that have been really exceptional at hardening that value for us and helping us like drive that for ourselves as well and take pride in it.
Oh yeah. Get me all excited talking about that B side. I lived that life for a while.
I'm satisfied.
Woo! Oh, so good. All right. I have 3 more questions for you, and there's a theme to them. What is one thing that you wish every youth athlete in the country understood a little better?
About mindset, about psychology?
Could be anything, and all of your experience.
I mean, big picture would be nice, but that's, I think, hard to scale and scope.
Yeah.
But I just think like we tend to problematize so much of our experience when it's not good. Like, I'm overactivated or underactivated, or I feel this and I don't feel this, and it's just like, hey, it's a part of the human experience, right? Like, some days it's going to feel good, and other days it's not going to feel good, and you can be great in either situation. And so I just think I wish like more people understood like how capable we are, like, if that makes sense. Like,
totally. And the move through. We don't have to get stuck in
through,
stuff.
Yeah. We can move through anything.
Ooh. All right. What is one thing you wish every parent of a young athlete understood a little better?
We love you, parents. Parenting is a very, very like hard job.
Seems so
It's
hard.
almost kind of like going to Vegas and playing Russian roulette. I just think like that, whether your kid's like uber talented or not, like, I think bigger picture, all kids want is like to feel loved by their parents. And like, yes, it's fun to see their stoke and like how they light up if they've done something really well, or if their team's won. But the thing that matters most is like just feeling unconditionally loved, and how like amazing it is to have a kid, like have their kids walk off the court and say like, I love how much you like go for it. I love your effort. I love what a great teammate you are. You're so kind. Like, I see you bringing people in, and like the impact of reinforcing and loving up like your kids' unique characteristics. If it's like they're stoked, I've said this before with you, if they're stoked about like snack time in between the games, then like help them be stoked about it, and help them like bring stoke to their other teammates about it. Just like, like.
So good.
I think we could do it's such a gift to be around.
And lastly, what is one thing that you wish every youth coach in the country understood a little better this year?
I think it's super important to be able to like open the aperture and see the big picture. And then like when you need to kind of dial in the aperture and like dial in focus, great. But like, I think more that like coaches can hold big picture, hold, like 2 truths to be true for kids and young athletes. You're just like doing such a service for them to be resilient down the line, whether it's in volleyball, in college, or like working at some, kick-ass IT company or something, like, so like opening and closing the aperture and holding both, and teaching and modeling how to be able to do both for athletes is like life lesson.
Nicole, thank you. You've heard me say this a lot, but I don't think there's anything better than being in the highs and lows with people like you that you love. And I feel so lucky of how much life we've been able to share. And for love, I know this podcast is for a lot of coaches outside of that as well, but for you to get to impact our pros and our youth athletes and our coaches, it's so meaningful and we're all better for it. So thank you for taking the time today.
Thanks for having me. Yeah, grateful to be in it with y'all. This is fun.
All right. Thank you all for tuning in to Beyond the Court. And thanks to our guest, Dr. Nicole Davis, for joining us today. To learn more about League One Volleyball, follow us on Instagram at LOVB. And in the meantime, keep working hard, having fun, and go on and spread the love today. All right. We'll see you next time.